Who would come out on top in a battle to the death between the SAS and the US Navy SEALs? They're the best of the best, the toughest of the tough, and when it comes to special military operations, there's nobody you'd trust more than the British Special Air Service, or SAS, and the US Navy Sea, Air and Land, or SEAL teams. But as for who's better, it's a question we'll likely never find a definitive answer to, given that the UK and US are as close as any military allies have ever been. Still, a little friendly competition never hurt anybody, and perhaps the best way to see who would come out on top in a battle between these two elite squadrons is to examine the training that their members undertake. It goes without saying that both the SAS and SEAL training regimes are grueling, brutal even. However, we want to know if that training gives either one the edge over the other. Before we can figure that out, we have to consider what each group actually does, as their purposes shed some light on the training that they go through. First, the SAS. Created in 1941, the SAS started life as L Detachment Special Air Service Brigade in a sweltering North African desert. Back then, the brigade numbered over 5,000 members, who were primarily tasked with taking part in small raids behind enemy lines to take out installations of secure territory for the Allies during World War II. Airfields and ports were their main targets, and upon being renamed the 1st Special Air Service in 1942, the SAS expanded its scope to take on targets in Italy and France, even playing a role in the famous D-Day landings. World War II ended and the SAS disbanded. That is until 1947, when the squadron was reformed into something similar to what we know today, an elite battalion of fighters only numbering between 300 and 400 at any one time. The SAS specializes in hostage rescue, covert surveillance, and close combat operations designed to take out or secure land-based targets quickly. These operations often require members to spend extended amounts of time in enemy territory, sometimes even surviving off the land in addition to their limited rations, with the goal of getting in, completing an objective, and getting out with as little fuss as possible. In many ways, the Navy SEALs operations cross over. That's especially the case since 9/11, when the SEALs were increasingly tasked with completing operations in Afghanistan, a landlocked country that would traditionally have been outside of the group's remit. Still, the SEALs often conduct the same types of operations as the SAS, precise attacks designed to take out installations and secure hostages. But there's a key difference between the SAS and the SEALs: the maritime element. The clues are in the names. The SAS is an air service brigade. That doesn't mean its members never spend time on ships. However, the SAS isn't an extension of the British Navy, whereas the SEALs are made up of the elite of the US Navy. As such, SEALs have a maritime element to their operations and thus their training that doesn't exist in the SAS. Beyond the land-based operations they've taken on in the last 2 decades, SEALs also conduct beach reconnaissance and hydrographic surveys, in addition to conducting raids on coastal and at-sea targets. The reason this is important is because it gives some insights into the differences in training we'll discuss later. The SEALs have much more water-focused training, as is evidenced by both the training itself and the requirements individuals have to meet to even apply to become a SEAL. Speaking of application requirements, let's look at what a soldier needs to have before they can even start training. The SAS complicates things a little here, as they have 3 divisions: the 21, 22, and 23 SAS. Both the 21 and 23 SAS are essentially Army Reserve divisions, with applicants having no requirement for previous military service. But that's not what we're focusing on here. It's the 22 SAS that's responsible for most of the division's operations. And to stand any chance of joining, a candidate must first serve as part of the British Army for at least 3 years, though many choose to get more experience under their belts before joining. That 3 years of service covers basic military training. The SAS starts candidates off at a much higher level and allows the candidates to amass some experience. Though not obligatory, candidates often join units that already have grueling training conditions, such as the Royal Marines, so the experience they have within the Army is at least close to what they'll undergo in SAS training. Beyond that, criteria are limited. The candidate needs to be at least 18 years old, though more realistically, the minimum age would be 21, given the 3 years of required service, and there's no set upper age limit. However, anybody above the age of 32 has a lower chance of getting into the training. All candidates must come from a Commonwealth country, though the SAS makes occasional exceptions for certain foreign nationals, and must be able to read, write, and speak English fluently. A certain level of mental aptitude is required, and will be tested as part of selection, and the candidate must have a clean criminal record. The SEALs don't have a requirement that you serve in the Navy or any branch of the US military before applying. You simply become part of the Navy if you pass the selection process, but their entry requirements are strict in other ways. Applicants mustn't be colorblind and must have at least 20/40 vision in their strongest eye and 20/70 in their weaker eye. There's a higher educational requirement too. A SEAL applicant needs to have a high school diploma and be capable of passing the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, ASVAB. Beyond that, the applicant needs to be a US citizen who's able to receive security clearance. A criminal background check will come into play here, and be under the age of 28. And finally, nobody can apply to be a SEAL unless they pass the physical examination the Navy requires of all its divers, again hinting at the water-based nature of the training to come. And while applicants don't need to be part of the US Navy before applying to become SEALs, experience in maritime operations definitely doesn't hurt. What's surprising here is the application criteria are fairly basic. Neither organization has really strict requirements for military service. Barring the 3 years of experience an SAS candidate must serve, candidates don't need to have conducted certain types of operations and generally don't need an exceptional level of education to become members of the SAS or the SEALs. These facts indicate that training for both groups is less focused on what the candidate has already accomplished and more on whether they can be molded into the type of operative that would be beneficial to the organization. Even so, many of the people watching this video could meet most, if not all, of the application requirements to enter SAS or SEAL training. That's the easy part. The ease of application gives no hint to the hell that awaits a candidate once they're accepted into training, and it's in training that we start to see some clearer differences between the SAS and SEALs. Both groups have 3 main training phases, though anybody who applies to be a SEAL first has to complete a physical screening test to confirm that they have what it takes to move into the first of the 3 phases of SEAL training. This is a simple test of fitness. Candidates must be able to swim 500 yards in at least 12 minutes and 30 seconds. They must be able to complete 50 push-ups in 2 minutes, as well as 50 sit-ups in 2 minutes. There's a running component too, with candidates needing to run 1.5 miles in 10 minutes and 30 seconds. And finally, there are pull-ups. SEAL applicants must be able to do 10 of them, though thankfully there's no time limit attached. The SAS doesn't have this initial screening test, but there's a reason, as you might remember from before. All candidates are already part of the British military, meaning they've already passed basic training. That training tested their fitness, so the SAS doesn't need to screen candidates to ensure they're even capable of trying to pass through training. They already know. With those initial stages out of the way, let's run a stage-by-stage comparison to see which has the most grueling entry requirements. Phase 1 for the SAS, the hills. Sounds quite relaxing, right? A few jaunts into the beautiful English countryside to prepare you for what's to come. But nothing could be further from the truth. The hills is a body-breaking test of endurance, as well as a test of how well a candidate can read a map so they can navigate unfamiliar terrain. It takes place in the Brecon Beacons, located on the outskirts of Wales, with each recruit receiving the same equipment, a rifle, rucksack, and rations weighing a total of 30 kilograms. Over the next 4 weeks, SAS candidates take part in marches of between 10 and 50 miles, all against the clock, in which they have to navigate through some of the most difficult terrain in the UK. And there's no way to make it easier. In summer, the Brecon Beacons are so hot that a candidate will be sweating through their kit in no time. When winter comes, it brings with it snow, rain, and freezing temperatures. And by the way, candidates have to climb a mountain at the end of their first week. Pen y Fan is the highest peak in the Brecon Beacons mountain range, and if the candidate can't scale it in 4 hours and 10 minutes or less, they're out. The final week of the 4 is Test Week, a tough collection of marches that culminate in the Long Drag, 40 miles of trekking while hoisting a 25-kilo Bergen rucksack along with food, water, and a rifle. To make matters worse, the candidate only has a map, compass, and some grid references given to them beforehand to get to their destination within 24 hours. If they get lost, 40 miles could become 50 or even 60. SEALs take the first training phase from the hills and into the water. The first phase of Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, or BUDS, is an 8-week physical condition course that includes some running, along with time obstacle courses and 4-mile runs while wearing boots. Candidates will also get into the water, with the first phase of BUDS including 2 miles of ocean swimming using fins. Candidates also spend time learning the basics of small boat operations. as well as how to create the hydrographic surveys and charts the SEALs use for their operations. It's a heady mix of endurance and intelligence training, made worse by a constant feeling of exhaustion that reaches its most draining in Week 4, Hell Week. 2/3 of candidates never make it past Hell Week. For 5.5 days, candidates swim, run, and learn while operating on less than 4 hours sleep per day. They'll face miserable underwater conditions, with the training bringing them to the verge of hypothermia, which combines with the sheer exhaustion they face to make this the single week of the 8 that everybody dreads. The clarion call of Hell Week is secured is the only respite, though candidates still face another 4 weeks, albeit less taxing ones after. Though both phases are very different, it's clear they have the same goal: to test both the endurance and mental fortitude of the candidates. However, it seems like the SEALs top-load their training thanks to Hell Week. In fact, NavySeals.com even says that most of the people who make it through the first phase of BUDS will make it through the next 2 phases with very few problems. The same can't be said for SAS training. As for which is tougher, it's hard to say. SEAL candidates are under constant pressure to learn and are placed in conditions that could have devastating effects on their health. But so too are the SAS candidates. To make matters worse, they spend most of their time outdoors trying to survive against the elements and mountainous terrain, while relying on navigational skills they may not have been trained in while in their unit of the British military. It's a tough choice, but even with Hell Week taken into account, the SAS training may just be a little harder on the body. On to Phase 2. The second phase of SAS training takes candidates from the windswept hills of Wales to the cloying jungles of Brunei, Belize, or Malaysia. For 6 weeks, candidates train in sweltering jungle conditions, which are a far cry from even the summer conditions in the Brecon Beacons. Those who survived Phase 1 are split into 4-man patrols and are given a single task: survive behind enemy lines. SpecialOps.org says that the average candidate loses about 13 pounds during their 6 weeks in the jungle. And yet, despite the clear physical toll that jungle training takes on candidates, it's the mental component that proves the most taxing. Beyond their patrols, candidates have to maintain their equipment in exceptionally humid conditions, overcoming the exhaustion they experience to ensure their operations go off without a hitch, despite the intense pressure under which they're placed. Ultimately, Phase 2 operates under a simple philosophy: place the candidates in the worst on-land conditions imaginable and see if they can make it 6 weeks. If they can, they're capable of fighting anywhere. As for the SEALs, Phase 2 of BUDS is almost all about diving practice. There are still physical training components, running and swimming included, and those components are ramped up a notch from the first phase, albeit not up to the same level as Hell Week. But most of the 8 weeks spent in the diving phase of BUDS training go towards teaching the candidates how to operate underwater. They learn how to do scuba dives using both compressed air and 100% oxygen, lending them the versatility and knowledge they need to operate under the waves. Distance is also trained, with divers plumbing the depths to raise their underwater endurance. And as we see in SAS training, a mental component comes into play, as candidates learn mission-focused swimming and diving techniques that help with covert operations, and if the worst happens, escape from dangerous situations while underwater. Given the stark contrasts between these two approaches to second phase training, comparing them is like comparing apples and oranges. It's clear that the jungle phase of SAS training is more physically taxing, and likely more mentally and emotionally draining. But Phase 2 of BUDS is more focused. The SEALs need to know how to dive. It's in the job description, and the 8 weeks they spend in this phase show them how to dive under the most strenuous conditions. Still, as mentioned earlier, most candidates who pass the first phase of BUDS will pass the second, with only those who struggle with academic issues. Those academic issues apply to the jungle phase of SAS training too. However, the sheer stress placed on the body during the 6 weeks in the jungle likely leads to many candidates washing out before they get to the next phase. And that phase, Phase 3, is the final phase in SAS training, as well as the final phase in BUDS. For the SAS, this phase is all about what happens if something goes wrong. That's a distinct possibility when conducting covert operations behind enemy lines. Research the Bravo 20 story if you'd like a real-life account. And the SAS trains its candidates in escape, evasion, and tactical questioning (TQ). Escape and evasion, or E&E training, starts with a handful of briefs from Special Forces soldiers and former prisoners of war (POWs) before the candidate is dumped in the countryside wearing only World War II-era coats. They have instructions to reach select waypoints in the countryside while they're constantly hunted by enemy patrols that are tasked with capturing them. This lasts for 3 days. Then, regardless of whether the candidate is caught or not during the E&E phase, they head to the TQ phase. Here the training takes on a whole new element, as candidates are subjected to the type of interrogation they'd face if caught by the enemy. Torture is an aspect of this to an extent, as candidates are forced to stand in stress positions for hours on end as they're bombarded with questions, and through it all they can only answer with what the SAS calls the Big Four: name, rank, date of birth, and serial number. Every other question receives the same response: "I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question." For their part, the interrogators may use all sorts of tactics to get anything other than the stock answers out of the candidates. That may include pretending to be their friends, creating good cop, bad cop scenarios, and even hitting some low blows, literally and figuratively, that involve abusing the captive's genitalia. It's days of being treated as a POW and proving that you have both the mental and physical fortitude to withstand the constant abuse. By comparison, the third phase of SEAL training seems like a cakewalk, though nothing could be further from the truth. The third part of BUDS training is a 9-week phase focused on land warfare. The physical training started in the first phase continues and is ramped up, but most of this phase focuses on taking candidates out of the water and training them to operate on the ground. Basic skills are taught, including marksmanship, demolitions, and similar weapons training. Candidates will also learn how to patrol on land and engage in fast rope operations such as rappelling from heights. In short, they're learning much of what they'd have learned had they undergone basic training for the infantry or other land-based forces. And there's good reason for this. If you remember our earlier discussion about the entry requirements for the SAS and Navy SEALs, you'll remember that every SAS candidate needs to have at least 3 years of military service under their belt before they can apply. SEAL candidates don't need this experience. They can apply as soon as they enter the military, meaning they need to go through basics to become even more well-rounded. Plus, there's the issue of SEALs now conducting more land-based operations than ever before. Remember, it was the SEALs who conducted the covert raid on Osama bin Laden's compound in a land-based operation, a task which they may not have undertaken pre-9/11. Still, if we're to compare the third phase, it's clear that the combined E&E and TQ that SAS candidates endure is brutal in comparison to the more general training the SEALs face in the third part of their BUDS. But again, this also highlights the different ways that the teams operate. SEALs are rarely deployed into situations where capture is a distinct possibility, whereas SAS troops are. Still, in both cases, once Phase 3 is completed, the candidate has passed the main selection process. But the ordeal isn't over. In fact, SEALs have to go through even more training before they get their tridents, the insignia of the Navy SEALs, including 3 weeks of basic parachute training. After that, the training shifts from tests of physical endurance to ones more focused on mental fortitude. A further 8 weeks of SEAL qualification training takes place, teaching the candidate about how to plan missions, operate under SEAL procedures, and adapt to the specific tactics the SEALs use. This is far and away the least strenuous training that SEALs receive, but it's not unimportant. All of the physical attributes in the world mean nothing if the candidate doesn't have the tactical nous to operate effectively, with this final aspect of SEAL training giving them the skills they need to do so. The SAS approaches things a little differently. Once a candidate has shown they can withstand the harshest of interrogations, they are officially part of the SAS. That means they get the famous beige beret, along with the winged dagger insignia that signifies they're one of a select group of just a few hundred people. That sense of accomplishment is short-lived, as the candidate then enters a probationary period called continuation training. They'll effectively operate as a fully fledged member of the SAS, but they'll do so under close surveillance of commanding officers who are looking to see that the candidate not only has the ability to withstand intense physical stress, but can also operate as part of the UK's elite covert operations unit. Many can't. A large number of soldiers who pass through the SAS's selection process still get returned to unit, meaning they're sent back to the unit from which they came because they can't get to grips with the realities of working within the SAS. By this point, you can reach an obvious conclusion. Both the SAS and the Navy SEALs have brutal training programs that are specifically designed to weed out the majority of candidates to leave them only with those who have the right combination of strength and intelligence. As to which is tougher, you may have your own opinion, but there's one more aspect of these elite training programs that we haven't covered yet: washout rates. In other words, how many people drop out of SAS and SEAL training before ever touching the finish line. For the SAS, the washout rate stands at about 90%. Given that the SAS runs its training twice per year, with each intake including about 125 people, that means that only 30 of the 300 who try to get through selection actually make it. And that's before you account for anyone who ends up being returned to their units because they fail the continuation training that comes after selection. As for BUDS, it has a slightly higher pass rate than SAS training. According to a 2022 BBC report, the 24-week course has a pass rate that varies from as high as 30% to as low as 15%. It's also worth noting that SEAL training involves more candidates than SAS training. Where the SAS gets 30 new members per year, the SEALs get between 200 and 250. But even at its worst, SEAL training's attrition rate is lower than the SAS training, which may indicate one of two things. Either SAS training is tougher, or the candidates taking it aren't as strong as those who apply to the SEALs. It seems unlikely to be the latter. But as a final point, it's also worth pointing out that both types of training can have deadly consequences for candidates who have the desire to pass through but are overcome by the sheer level of demand placed on their bodies. Deaths happen. They're not common, but they can occur. A report in Britain's Daily Mail states that figures from the UK's Ministry of Defence suggest that up to 20 potential recruits have died between 1984 and 2021 in the Brecon Beacons alone. And that's not to mention the other phases of SAS training. Meanwhile, SEAL training also has a far from spotless record when it comes to deaths, as a 2022 report from NBC revealed that 17 SEALs who actually made it through their training have died during further training exercises. These fatalities underscore the simple fact that regardless of any friendly competition that may exist between the SAS and the SEALs, both have dangerous and demanding training programs that only elite soldiers can survive. All who try are to be commended, and those who pass for either organization are to be respected. And now we're curious about what you think. You've learned about each selection process in detail, so which do you think is the most difficult? If you had to choose one to do you think you'd have a better chance at passing the SAS training or SEAL training? And perhaps most importantly, which do you think better prepares its candidates for covert operations? Let us know who you think comes out on top in the training battle between the SAS and the US Navy SEALs. And don't forget to subscribe for more military analysis from military experts.